it's not just we're not just this art center with these teachers over there, but we're like, it's much closer knit. It's a much closer community where we really know the artists and they know us really, and it is kind of like family. And I think that, as long as we keep that alive too, I think we're gonna stay here.
That was Paul Moshammer, Creativity Explored's Director of Programs. I'm Jeff, and this is Storied San Francisco. Welcome to Part 3 in our Creativity Explored series. Creativity Explored is an art space for folks with developmental disabilities located in the Mission. If you missed Parts 1 or 2, please go back and check those out. Paul grew up in Vienna, and his parents were both artists. In this podcast, we hear the story of his circuitous route to San Francisco in the late 1980s and his eventual arrival at Creativity Explored, a place he's been volunteering or working with for more than 30 years. In the background of this episode, you'll also hear from Creativity Explored artist Vincent Jackson. Here's Paul.
So I grew up in Vienna, Austria. Okay. My whole family still lives there, meaning my parents, my siblings, two brothers and a sister. And they had a big influence on me because my parents were, often you hear kids get discouraged from choosing art as a direction. Yes. But my parents were the opposite. Oh. My father was an architect. My mother was an artist, golden silversmith, but she was really an artist in her way. Everything about her was art.
She lived art.
She lived art, even though she didn't pursue a career because she ended up being an at-home mother of four. Okay. And but she did it in all these other ways, creativity. Yeah. And so I learned we had that strong culture of going to museums, which for kids it's like, oh my God, right. And not a museum. I don't want to go. Well, we went to Italy in the summer a couple of times, which was great because in Austria you have no ocean, and so going to Italy was great because you had the ocean as a kid in the beach. But then we would go every other day to Ravenna or some cultural city and look at old Byzantine mosaics and cathedrals, and I was exhausting. But I appreciate it in the long run because I was really interested in all that later when I was in my teens and late teens, and I went back to Italy many, many times before I moved out here, like every summer, and it was a great influence. And so I went to art school in Vienna, and
what type of art were you? And were you doing art before you went to?
Yeah, so I did art all my life, kind of going to after-school arts programs, and then I went to a textile design school for 5 years between age 14 and 19, and it was like an amazing school. It was more like, I think we were like 44 hours a week there, so it was more than a job, but it was a lot of it was like drawing and nude drawing and painting outdoors and creating designs for tapestries, and so a lot, like more than half of it was creativity, and the other half was just whatever, English, German, and
the boring
all
stuff.
The geography, which is so that was a great school.
Yeah.
And so then I was done with that with 19, and then I was kind of trying to get into the art academies in Vienna, and I was already really, I think I had my own voice in art, and it felt like it was not so encouraged in some of these schools. It was like, you know what you're doing, just they're looking more for raw talent, but not much more.
Right.
So I ended up going to this stinky private school, which not a great school, I think, but I was doing my own thing. I was doing etchings and lithographies at that time.
Still in Vienna?
Still in Vienna. Okay. So I was kind of in my early 21 maybe.
Okay.
And I went there for a few years. And then I started traveling, and so when I was 23, so then I went to Israel, and that's where I met my wife.
Okay.
Back then girlfriend.
Is she Israeli?
No, she's Cuban-American.
Okay.
So that's what brought me to the U.S.
You two just happened to be there at the same time?
Yeah, so we both volunteered in a kibbutz.
Yeah,
and
I love
there.
that.
She was there for 4 months. I was there. She was on a trip around the world, really, while I was just kind of escaping Austria. I was like, I got to get out of here, do something different. So I was there, and it was a great experience working in agriculture, but still having enough time in the afternoon to draw and paint and sit around. and meet people from all over the world, from Australia,
Right, working
Argentina.
living on the kibbutz.
Yeah.
Yeah. How long were you there?
So I was there for 3 months, and then Maria and I started traveling together. She had this plan of going to Africa. I had no money. I had no plan. I was just going to Israel. And so then we went to Cairo, Egypt and Cairo for 5 weeks. And then I borrowed money from her already. And then I asked my parents, can I borrow some money so I can go to Kenya with her?
Okay.
And my parents wired me some money, and which I later on paid back once I got a job in Vienna. But then spent another 5 weeks or so in Kenya, back to Israel.
Wow. And this was maybe the 80s?
This is 88, 80, 89, going 88 into 89. Okay. And then Maria came with me to Vienna, and at that point I made up my mind. I want to leave Austria.
Okay.
Which was, very somehow a quick decision. But she went back to the U.S. and I worked for 4 months to make money. And
you said she's Cuban American?
Yeah, she grew up in Miami.
Miami,
she grew up in Miami, yeah.
Okay.
But had lived in San Francisco prior to going on this trip.
Okay.
So end of 89, 2 days before the earthquake, I came out here. October 15, 89.
Some people might blame you.
And
that's amazing timing.
Yeah, the timing was
when the earthquake happened, were you really?
So I lived in Pacific Heights, close to the Fillmore, Vincent, on California, Buchanan Street.
Yeah.
And apparently, because it's sort of on a rock, it didn't shake as much as in other places.
Bedrock helps.
So I just thought, this is woo. But I was not I wasn't scared. Some people, I had 4 housemates at that time. And one of them just got home a few minutes before the earthquake. And she was just, oh my God, this is the big one. And and anyways, but then once it settled in, kind of this is this is bad. This is serious. This can happen. But so this was my first few days. And then literally, and this is interesting, my wife ran into Creativity Explored. She saw Creativity Explored just before I came out here, and she told me about it, and she said, you should check this place out because you would really like it.
Did she just happen to be walking by?
She walked by, yeah.
That's my story.
Yeah. And back then it wasn't that open. There was sort of stuff in the wind, almost like white, not plywood, but it didn't look like
it wasn't open.
It didn't look.
So I came over here to help one of the teachers get things cleaned down and everything.
Yeah. The gallery wasn't open yet.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't a gallery. It was more like an office, and there was some ceramics in the front, but you really had to get through the office to come
back here to the studio part.
Oh, but a part I didn't mention earlier now is when I went to art school in Vienna, because of my parents, I was sort of groomed to go to galleries and look at all that stuff,
Yeah.
But we had an art history teacher who talked for one whole semester about art of children and art of people that were locked up in institutions with mental illness.
Okay.
And I was like, whoa, that just opened a new door to me.
Magnetic.
That really spoke to me.
Yeah.
And so I already in Europe and other places, I really looked for art and museums and shows that are not mainstream, so-called mainstream. And so my wife knew I had a really affinity of people that see things different from the regular way. And so when she saw,
I found that for you here.
And she said, you should go there. And so literally a month later, it was November of 89, I came in here, it was a rainy day, and I was just oh my God, where am I? I stayed here for 4 hours, and one of the teachers that's still here, Pilar Olavarria, she, kind of talked to me in different artists, and I was mesmerized. I was totally mesmerized, and I was I want to volunteer here.
Yeah.
And it took me a couple of months, and in January of 1990, I started volunteering here.
Okay. I mean, I don't want to jump ahead in the story, but do you still kind of feel that sense of magic and wonderment here?
The sense of magic and wonderment with the art and artists never left.
Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah,
it's constantly renewing.
Yeah, it's renewing, and there's magical stuff happens every day here. It's incredible.
Awesome.
But I sometimes don't see it as much because I'm pulled in.
You're in it.
My other directions now, being more in management. There's so many other things going on that are, that I don't love as much as the art and the artist, but that
someone has to do it.
Kind of pulls me away from it. So it's kind of like, when we had to take a break last year because of the year and a half because of the COVID, coming back was really sweet. Seeing artists like in person again.
Was it emotional?
Yeah. It was,
again, jumping ahead in the story, but it's okay.
Yeah, definitely. It was emotional.
It's still happening.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I can, like Vincent, we're basically like in different groups. We have these 3 different pods throughout the week. So like JD's in a different group from Vincent. I'm in a different group from Vincent or JD. Like in 3 different. So it's to protect ourselves from but it's kind of sad. It's not, we're not together, and it's also with the teachers, different teachers and managers. They're all in 3 different groups.
When he was here, that was his table over there. That was his table, and it was that cabinet. It was a tin cabinet. He would keep it locked, so nobody would go in there and steal the supplies. And then one day before the class started, I said, "Paul, somebody go in your cabinet. Somebody go in your cabinet." Then Paul got up and asked the person, what did you take out of there? What did you take out of it? They said, "I don't know." Because I know when I did etching, he put most of our etching boards upstairs because he didn't want to leave them in the closet for somebody else to come and take them. See, we did a lot of etching. I did a lot of crayon etching. We had a lot of white paper that was donated to us. I just made the place and we etched.
Yeah. Cool. Well, let's talk about the opposite of the pods. The world, the 30-some years that you were here before the pandemic. I mean, that's a lot, obviously, to cover. But you said you started off as a volunteer, or?
Yeah, it's like 1990. I probably came in once a week, and I worked mostly with a former teacher. She's no longer here, Esther Hernandez, and the group that was in her down. It was kind of the lower area of the studio.
Yeah, I remember Esther.
And that was great, but I was not quite sure what I'm really doing. I'm visiting. Am I not really helping? It was a little bit uncertain.
Yeah.
But I definitely loved being here.
Yeah.
And then a few months later, this is our first director, Ray Patlan, he asked me if I wanted to be a substitute. And I felt like, I'm not a teacher, but I can try. And so they hired me as a substitute for a few weeks.
Okay.
And it was just, I loved being, that felt more meaningful. I felt like, oh my God,
Definitely.
I can be with the artists, bring them paint, watch them, make sure everything's okay.
That's
kind of how I felt. Like I didn't feel like I'm like a teacher. I felt much more like facilitating, helping. And I'm still, actually, that hasn't changed for me all the years. I mean, I can teach certain things, but I feel like we're learning more than we're teaching in a way. Maybe sometimes the teaching artist, it's very collaborative.
That's awesome.
And then, like a year later, I was, and the funny thing is I actually didn't live in San Francisco for like 6 or 7 months in between, because I was on a car trip. Like my wife and I bought a van, and we lived in the van and drove throughout the country.
Oh, fun.
We're in Florida, and then came back like 6-7 months later. And the director called me. He's like, "Are you still interested in substituting?" I was kind of wondering what am I going to do when I come back to San Francisco. And I was like, "Oh yeah, sure." And I came, and that was, remember, Chuy Camposano, so Vincent's first teacher, was leaving on a kind of a health leave. He was not, I think he was just not feeling good, and so he left, and he never.
We were buddies.
Yeah, Vincent and him were very close, Chuy Camposano, and then I realized, well, he's not coming back, and Ray, the director, asked me, "Well, do you want to apply for the job?" And I'm like, I'm not qualified. I mean, I was really thinking that. I didn't say it to him, but I was like, well, and then And then literally, like, he asked me again, and then I told my wife, well, what do you think? Well, we make up a resume, you apply. I mean, it looks like they want you.
Yeah.
And sure enough, then I got that job, and it was like in 1991. Okay. And think, Vincent, what's funny is not funny, but it's at that time you had that surgery, and you were not here. You had like a brain surgery.
Yeah, I had a brain surgery. And at that time I was there. But they would call that hospital. Believe you me, they would get on that phone and call that hospital. And then the switchboard operator at the front desk say, it's one of your instructors from Creativity Explorer. I picked up the phone and I say, hello. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they I think one of them brought me some art supplies out there for me to draw.
There you
because
go.
I didn't want to be bored.
Yeah.
And then after that, I moved all the way out to Westboro, and I had to, because after it was over, I had to get. The doctor told me to get out the noise and go somewhere quiet. I enjoy it. Well, I had to figure out where the buses went.
Yeah, it's
I didn't
different.
know nothing about no buses out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
So anyway, but I ended up, which I didn't know at the very first day, but Vincent ended up being one of the artists I worked with.
Oh, nice.
Because that's the table I got, and
right.
so, and because we had 5 teachers and they had 5 different areas, so, and so we worked together for many, many years, like
awesome.
I don't know, 22 years, and then
the strangest thing, his son became my godchild.
Oh yeah,
yes.
You told me that.
Yes.
What's his name? What's your son's name?
Jonah, which is spelled like Jonah. So it's
Jonah.
Yeah.
And he bucked one time. I said, Paul, come get him. He looked around at me, gave me this baby look like, oh, you serious? But when he got strong enough, that's when I started caring.
How old is he now?
He is 26.
Okay, wow.
And he's in film, and he moved a lot from Southern California to Berkeley to North Carolina. Now he's been with us, but he's moving to LA in a couple of weeks, so he's on his way down there. Yeah.
We're losing another good creative.
Yeah.
That happens. Paul, I was told that you knew the founders of Creativity Explorer. Is that true?
Yeah, I mean, Vincent knows them better than I do, but I knew actually only one, because Florence Ludin's cat had passed away, so I did not know her, but I got to know Elias Katz, so they founded it together.
Yes.
And he was more like the psychology, and she was more the artist. And they had this vision that, because they came from New York, and they realized there was money. This is like the late 60s or so, early 70s. They realized there's money in California for funding to start programs like Ideas They Had, which was exactly that. An art center where you have teaching artists, where you have artists with these different abilities or disabilities, if we call it, but it's really different abilities or great abilities, right? And then you get a board of director, and it was like like a blueprint. They laid it out while these centers are, and they hired the first director and then the first teachers, and it started really slow. And we started at Mission Cultural Center in a room, like just a couple teachers and a couple artists, and then it grew and grew and grew, and we moved a couple times, and then ended up here on 24th in Utah, right?
I knew Elias Katz.
Yeah.
She was the type didn't play with nobody. If somebody told her she couldn't open up an arts program in a building, she would tell them, I'll be back.
Yeah.
And she went back.
Awesome.
And told them, look, she even did art with us in hotel gallery, places.
Yeah.
So therefore, she was a go-getter.
Yeah.
She was a very go-getter. And her husband, he was good too. They did a book. It was a red copy book of different ways to teach. It been in I'm sure they're gonna revise it. I'm sure, but that book had a lot of different ways, but if a person was in a wheelchair, I don't think if I was an instructor, I don't think that would be a no-no for me to make him a little crown film to use to put the brush in and kneel down like that. So they started NIAD, that was in Richmond. Then they started Creative Growth, which it was in Oakland.
Okay.
So they were a great part of our programs, of the programs that they started. Yeah. She was a go-getter. She found money for good paper. I mean, it was not that I remember it was a paper company in South San Francisco that we had to go to.
Yeah.
And to pick up paper. They would give us paper.
Awesome.
Good paper. It was not no cheap paper because...
And that was because of what she did, right?
Yeah, that's because of what she did.
Yeah.
But see, she was a strong woman, and he was a good person. Both of them were go-getters. Yeah. You couldn't tell them nothing. Yeah. They told you, excuse you, let's table that until next time.
Yeah.
It's because they were both of them were very interested of keeping this program and letting us stay in this building.
And look at this, it shows.
It shows.
Still
but
here.
This used to be a dance hall.
That's right.
It used to be.
Yep.
And I say, well, because, she was, and then when she passed away, I went to the memorial over at night in Richmond. I went to that. Mm-hmm. So when I heard, I said, oh, no, But, they were very influenced of having places for us to come.
Awesome.
And we was, like he said, we was in the Mission Culture Center because I knew how to get there. All I had to do was take the 14. Boom, I was right in front of it. Yeah. So, and then we opened up another program on Arkansas.
Oh, okay.
I think that's CE1, CE2, something like that. CE2, and we're CE1.
Oh,
so
still there? Oh, I didn't know
they're
that.
still there.
Okay.
And then I had Francis. He was a teacher here back then. He was a teacher because I knew, because he worked at one of them tables over there. Then after that, he became a director down there.
Okay.
See, we had so many people that have came and went and gone from working here. It's just that Elias Katz, she did not play and he did not play.
Yeah.
And it's one word she didn't want to hear. It was retard.
It's right.
She didn't want to hear that because if she caught one of these in here calling us that right today, she would say, come here, let's go in this room and talk. Now, if you say that one more time, you're out of here.
Yeah, right on.
She would just tell him, you out of here, Missy or Mister.
Yeah.
Because and she said, if I have to come back through here and hear that one more time, that would be into you.
That's the end, yeah.
That was the end because we don't use that word here.
Right.
Anyway.
Right on. Okay, let's go back to Paul. Thank you, Vincent. Okay. So do you want to talk about any kind of standout moments or anything in your time here in the, 30 some years? Any highlights? I'm sure there's just so much.
There's so many. Sometimes it's the little things that really count. I mean, like literally the little miracles, the little everyday where they see some artwork that's amazing. But there's highlights. We sort of were in a crisis in the end with our first director. There were just like Vincent mentioned, we started we call it CE2, our second location down on. Back then it was actually Folsom and 16, and things didn't go well money-wise, and there were some hopes for other artists to start here that never came through. Yeah. Anyways, but when he left, we were kind of, when our first director left, we were in a crisis, and I think then the next person, and Vincent mentioned Amy Taub, she was our second director. I think when she started, and within a year, she kind of turned the place around financially, and kind of it just was a, our first director was an artist. He was a muralist and he was great, but he was not so much an administrator, who knew how to grow an organization. And Amy kind of took it on, and had sort of also she had that spirit about her, being a person that can do anything. She'll get involved and help with anything that needs to be, like Vincent mentioned, she drove people home with her car. I borrowed her car so many times to drive others home, or for other errands or something. So I think that beginning of that time with her was a real highlight, because we were for a couple of years in a real crisis. So it was like, oh, and then we started, like I mentioned, when I first came at the front was an office.
Yeah.
There were 4 desks in there.
Right.
And so her vision right away is like, we got to have a gallery.
Awesome.
And so we kind of took all the desks out and had some help. That was like a donation or helping doing new floors, but also we paid for it with donations from board members to kind of build that whole, like what we have now in the gallery, like a nice bamboo floor. And so I think that was 2001. So having a gallery, kind of having sort of an outside face where you can actually see the work from the outside, that was a big, and it felt like it. Then we had openings. Every 2 months we had an opening, or even more often, and it was
And now we're this is now.
It was always Thursday nights, I remember.
Yeah.
And it was just more and more people came, and it was just it just became very vibrant as far as the public coming in more. Because before they were never not. People could come in and buy work, but it wasn't so advertised or so open.
Yeah.
So people had to find out, oh, what is this?
I remember the first time I came, it was by accident or by chance. I didn't know about it. And then after that, it was always like I would come on Thursday nights, and it was like the highlight of my trips to the Mission back then, when I would get to see a show here. And now, now
most of the shows that we have had has been successful.
Yeah, I bet.
And when I say successful, the people came.
Yeah.
We sent out invites.
Yeah.
They came, but on the invite we would say the door doesn't open until blah blah time. So if you were standing out there, we're still in here arranging stuff,
Right.
draping stuff to
Oh, yeah.
make it look nice before you come in.
Yeah.
So I'll say to Paul, I'll say somebody out there, oh, they can stay out there until 6.
Till the time, yeah.
Yeah, or they can go and sit at the pizza store and have a piece of pizza and a soda.
I was gonna say get a burrito.
But,
Yeah, that's special. Those shows are special.
Yeah.
and then too,
And that's one of her legacies, it sounds like. I'm sorry to interrupt.
then too, like if we stay, he'll buy food, he'll buy pizza and spaghetti.
Right on.
Because he would buy the food if I stayed, he said, Vincent, what do you want? I said, whatever you go and get, I'll eat it.
That's right.
So, yeah. And then too, we just, we stayed, I ate. Then I said, it's time for me to go get dressed. Because I was not going to be looking like this.
Yeah.
So I said, let me, they've seen me have some pretty cool stuff.
I
so
bet.
that's it.
I bet. So it sounds like she's got quite a legacy.
And then, so highlights. I think other highlights are like certain shows were real highlights. We had, for instance, in the last 20-some years, we had like 3 fashion shows, and they all in their own ways, they were all highlights, because it was kind of for artists wearing fashion that was created here.
Right.
Even though it was more funky, maybe. I don't know how long ago the first one was, maybe 15 years ago.
Yeah.
It was here, but
Yeah.
it was too narrow. I mean,
And we painted like the
runway.
the runway on the floor. I mean, it was funky in that sense, but we had fun, and I think the artists did too. And
we
it
had
was
fun,
like
but it was too narrow for I mean
To do the catwalk?
to do whatever. I had to stop, turn, and go back. Stop, turn, and go back.
Yeah.
And then I came back on the stage,
Right.
on the runway. I mean, it wasn't pretty now.
Yeah. But it still sounds fun.
Yeah.
It was fun. It was
Still
fun.
sounds fun, yeah.
It was fun. There was some little kids in it. I've
Oh,
seen some
cool.
little kids in it.
Cool.
Yeah.
I've seen some little kids in it. I think.
Yeah, actually, the first one, I think my son was maybe, I don't know, 5 or 6 or so, and there were some kids in it, and then like Amy's grandson, Sterling. Anyways, there were like some little kids, and so it was kind
Cute.
of just, it was kind of like the whole community was, not the whole, but some of the community were involved, and some artists and some staff were wearing outfits, and it was more funky, and then the last fashion show, not the very last one, but the one before was like much more. So that's already maybe that's like 3-4 years ago only.
Yeah.
And it was much more. It was here, but it was much more. Like models plus staff plus artists, and it was just a great event. Very inclusive. But one thing that I was just thinking of, I really liked our different fundraisers we had over the years. We used to have them at 111 Minna Street.
Okay.
And they were we did like, one year we did notables. So the artist did portraits of whatever, from people that are notable in the Bay Area. So Robin Williams to Kamala Harris was part of it. And she actually came back then.
When she was district attorney?
16, yeah, she's 18 years ago.
Yeah.
And Neil Young came and
awesome.
And so it was like, and they were cool, but then some artists were there too, and one former volunteer, she drove a limousine and she brought artists with the limousine.
Oh, wow.
And I actually have never been in a limousine, but some of the artists, it was for their first time to be in a limousine and get there. So there's like these highlights. They were sort of.
Then I think I did one called Mr. Leatherman, didn't I?
Oh yeah, you did the San Francisco. Yeah, he's called. Is he called Mr. I forgot now. San Francisco
Leatherman.
Mr. Leatherman.
I don't
Yeah,
know.
so and definitely like maybe fashion, but from the Castro, a guy like that. A San Francisco Letter or Mr. Letterman. Yeah, Vincent.
Yeah.
Vincent did a big portrait of him, and so it
And
was,
then I guess he must have bought it and liked it.
I don't remember what happened, but a lot of things sold too.
So many,
But
Yeah, I'm hoping it was. When I did it, I said, "Okay, I'll challenge." I did it. I thought, "Oh well, he was." Well, we can say he was a celebrity to San Francisco.
Right. So, Paul, what I'd like to end with, our theme on the podcast this year is "We're Still Here," and I'd love to hear your thoughts on sort of 2 topics around that. The fact that Creativity Explored is still here, obviously. But I think when we came up with that theme, one of the things that we feel like is being sort of squeezed out of San Francisco and that we're trying to hold on to and nourish is art in general. So if you could speak to those 2 things, please.
Wow. Yeah. I think that's a sad one. I think art in San Francisco being squeezed out of the city is it's like Vincent said, the city changed a lot, and I feel like it was just everywhere, like little storefronts or people you just felt more art in the street, somehow more out there, and in the community, the mission, and not that it's gone. There's muralists that are doing great stuff, and there's still some stores, but everything's gotten just different because the prices just to lease a little storefront are just like triple, quadrupled, and so many artists moved to Oakland, and it feels like that's what a vibrant art community is now. In a lot of ways, it feels like that, and that's really sad, And so, but then I think for me personally, I feel like that because Creativity Explored is still here, it's even more important to keep our community here, our artists here going, and I feel like we're not going away. I don't think that's not in the plan, and we have, in that sense, we have a great leadership now because because Linda is really good at fundraising and very good at looking at the big picture. What do we need? And we're looking at buildings, and maybe in a couple of years from now we can own our building, and then that will make a huge just having like that, as a cornerstone. Having a building would be great, because there's so many dreams and ideas we have. We don't want to be in two locations, like having a CE1 and CE2. We don't want to. Right now we have also community. We don't use them because of COVID, but we have inclusion studios at Art Explosion. They're just sitting there with stuff stored in it and dust falling. And we had a studio down at Root Division that artists used. So we're kind of in all these different areas. And I think having our own building will be, and I think that is going to happen. So I think that'll be really important for us. But then also, I think the connection to other art centers, like our sister organizations, like Vincent mentioned, NIAD in Richmond and Creative Grove in Oakland, they've sort of reconnecting stronger with the roots. I think that's really, really important. And it's happened also in the last few years. I don't coincidental, but also like the leadership of the organizations, like wanting to work together, is really strong. And that wasn't so much the case before. We were like more next to each other. Everybody's sort of doing their own thing. And now we had several shows where artists from all centers were involved. One was at Minnesota Street project. So I think just making us strong in San Francisco, in the community. Besides, the sales also, like we're selling more and more artwork, but that alone is not, I think, enough. It's just kind of like having that foundation, and one of the big amazing cornerstones of this organization is, I mean, there's the artists. There's like and artists like Vincent or Lauren. There's some artists that have been here 25, 35 years, and quite a few, and they're still here. But then there's also some teachers that have been here a long time. Yeah. And so it's not just, and some other staff too. And it's not just, we're not just this art center with these teachers over there, but we're like, it's much closer knit. It's a much closer community where we really know the artists and they know us, really. And it is kind of like family. And I think that, as long as we keep that alive too, I think we're going to stay here. And as we also grow into this new time in San Francisco and connect more also with other organizations, that's in the future too, like trying to network with. But I think our foundation, always going back and never forgetting about the cats, is the plans they made for these 3 centers and how we can actually connect and build on this again, and it's happening.
That was Paul Moshammer. On the next episode of Storied San Francisco, we'll meet another Creativity Explored artist, Vincent Jackson. Part 4 and the conclusion of our series drops next Tuesday, wherever you listen to podcasts. And now, a quick word from the folks at KQED's Right Nowish.
Hey, my name is Pendarvis Harshaw, and I'm the host of Right Nowish. It's an arts and culture podcast about the Bay Area. Every week, I talk to the cornerstones and the creatives in our community.
The real message is that, like, we can take care of ourselves. Like, we got us.
So it really represents, like, Black and brown people moving into this digital, futuristic, technological space.
We're the land of the hustlers, so we're going to survive it.
Check out the Right Nowish podcast. We'd love to keep you in the mix.
Music for the podcast was produced, performed, and curated by Otis McDonald. Original photography is by Michelle Kilfeather. Aaron Lim of Bitch Talk Podcast is our contributing producer. And the show is produced and hosted by me, Jeff Hunt. Now in our 4th season, we have more than 160 episodes available on our website, storiedsf.com, or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you can, please rate and review our show so we can reach even more folks. We love email. Drop us a line at storiedsf@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. Stay strong, stay healthy, keep dreaming, and we'll see you next time on Storied San Francisco.
This podcast is a proud member of the BFF.FM podcast network. Learn more at podcast.bff.fm.
BFF.FM, best frequencies forever.